Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to the Turbo 360 tutorial series. In this series, we're going to set up a basic React Redux application that uses server-side rendering to deliver the UI. And within that, we're going to employ a Redux architecture so that we can set the initial state with server-side rendering and then pass off the state to the client-side UI. So hopefully that all makes sense. We're going to use a basic user auth flow for a source of data, and basically we're going to determine if the user is logged in, one UI will show up, and if the user is not logged in, a different UI will show up. So hopefully that all makes sense, and that's it. Let's get started. So first things first. As always, make sure you have the right tools installed. So we're going to need gulp. So make sure you have that. And then we're going to need Webpack. And then last but not least, we're going to need the Turbo CLI. Excuse me. And even if you already have this, go ahead and run the install again anyway, because we're doing updates pretty frequently. The current version is right here, 0.15.8. So make sure you have that or higher depending on when you're watching this video. So next thing is head over to turbo360.co and create an account or log in depending on your situation. So I'm going to log in. Okay, and let's get started. So first thing we want to do is create an app. I'm going to call it user auth. Grab the app ID and copy that. And then head over to your terminal and let's create the corresponding app in your local environment. So turbo new user auth. We are going to use the React scaffold. cd into the user auth source code and run the npm install. So first thing we want to do is set up the user registration and login page, which will not be with React. It'll just be a regular HTML page so that we can create a couple users if you want, and create a login flow to maintain the login state using session management. And then once we establish that, we're going to render the UI using React Redux, which will vary depending on whether or not the user's logged in or not. So hopefully that all makes sense. It'll be a very simple application whose only real purpose is to show you how to render data server side using React Redux and then pass that data off to client side. So that's going to be it. Your install should be almost done. Okay, now that it's almost done, go ahead and run the dev server and make sure everything looks good on localhost. Okay, here we go. And this is all React Redux. So last thing is to connect the app to your remote project. And do a quick deploy just to make sure everything works on staging as well, so that we can be confident everything works on both environments. And while that's going, I'm going to open up the code in Sublime. Okay, so the deploy is up. Let's test the staging environment real quick, make sure everything looks the same. So here it is on staging, here it is on localhost, everything looks the same, so we are good to go. Great, so now let's get started. So first thing we want to do is, well, here's the directory structure. We're going to create a new views template called auth, where users can sign up and log in. Let's go ahead and do that right now. Excuse me. So cd to the views directory, create an auth.mustache file, and then go back to the root, and then inside the auth mustache, let's grab the index mustache and just paste it in here. And let's grab this div. Let's give it a container class because we will be using Bootstrap. Let's do h2 on this. All right, get rid of these bundle imports because these are the React imports, and for this page we're not going to use React. We're just going to do a regular HTML CSS. So right now we're setting up a registration form which will take a username and a password. And let's give this a form control class. Password. All right, I'm going to put this in a row because otherwise it's going to take up the entire page and it's going to look ugly. So let's just put it in a row here and then a column. Okay. Okay, good. Pretty straightforward registration form, but as you'll see, there's no action attribute in here. That's because we don't have a route for this. So let's go ahead and set up our route. So first thing we want to do is open up the routes file, and inside the index route, let's get rid of all this template code. And let's set up another route for the auth mustache. And we don't need any data, so we can just pass in null here. And that should be good to go. So let's go ahead and test it out. And then auth, and here we go. So let's set up the form. Let's see, user register, and then let's set up another form for login. User login, login. And let's see how that looks. So run the dev server and go back to the same page. Okay, and this will do for now. So now we need to set up the user route to handle these requests. So these will be post requests to the user route, which doesn't exist. So let's go ahead and create that. So we head over to our routes directory and create the user route. And inside the app.js here, don't forget to import it. It's very easy to forget. And then let's hook up the path. Okay, so now we have the user route. Let's populate it with some content. So I just copied and pasted from the index. The user route currently is supposed to support register and login as posts. So register and login. And for now, for each one of these, let's just render the JSON of the body that we pass in from the post forms, just to make sure everything worked. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult. Okay, let's try that. So now we go back to the root, run the dev server, and then go back here and we try the usernames. Try registering. There it is. And then try logging in as well. There it is. Okay, terrific. So that worked. So now what we want to do is actually create the user on our backend. So we have our Turbo SDK right here. So here we want to take the Turbo SDK and create the user using the rec body as our parameters, and then just run the usual promise sequence. Whoops, there we go. And then here we want to pass the data back from the Turbo service, and then here we just pass the error message. Alrighty, let's try that. Good. So this is obviously coming from the back end because it's a lot more data now. If we go to our Turbo dashboard and reload and go to the data store, we should see that new user we just created. So that worked, so we're good to go. So now we are successfully connected to the Turbo environment. So then here on login, let's do the same thing. Let's get rid of this static response. And instead of create user, let's call login like that. So we have LeBron James currently signed up. So if I go back here and do the dev server and go back to the auth page, I can sign up, log in as LeBron James. Here I'm going to enter the wrong password, and I should get the incorrect password message, which I do. Now I'm going to use a username that doesn't exist. User not found, that's the appropriate message. And now I'm going to log in correctly. And there we go. So now this route currently works as well. However, we're not really logging in because there's no session management going on here. So what we want to do is set up another request right here. But this one will be a GET request, and it's going to be called current user to tell if anyone is logged in. So the way we do that is through the vertex session. So inside the login, we want to set the vertex session in the success block right here. So we do rec vertex session and then user, and we pass in a JSON object that somehow uniquely identifies the currently logged in user. So I'm grabbing the ID of the user right here, which is this element right there, and that'll give me a unique reference to the user who's logged in. And this will be maintained across sessions. It's a standard session cookie. So then here we want to check for that. So let's see if rec.vertex. Okay, so here there is no vertex session, so in such a scenario the user is not logged in. It could also be that within the vertex session there is no user object. Same thing, user is not logged in. And then once we get past those blocks, we are now on success. And the user is stored in the vertex session, like so. So now keep in mind we have not persisted anything to the session yet, so when I check the current user, it should say not logged in. Oh, it does, because it's from a previous session. Yeah, it's a different ID. Alright, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to log in right now as LeBron James. Okay, now I'm logged in, but this time on success we set the session ID. So if I do current user, keep in mind this is the user ID. It's best to just look at the last 4 or 5 digits. So 2C611. So if I do current user, it's the same one, 2C611. So the currently logged in user is being stored in the session, which is great. So now we have login, register, login, and current user. Let's take this one step further and actually grab literally the profile of the current user. So turbo fetch one. Now the user ID is stored inside the ID key, so make sure you do that. And then just do what you normally do. Okay, now here we can pass in the data into the user object like so, and rather than just showing the ID in this case, now we should see the entire user in the current user block. So, and it is the one that's currently logged in. So that worked. That's good to go. So now we have, let's try something else. Let's go back to the auth route and create another user. So let's see stuff. Okay, so I created another user. If I go to my dashboard, I can confirm that real quick, like so. That worked. And if I go back here and log in as that user, I'm now logged in, and it's currently Steph Curry. So if I go to the current user route, it now gives me back Steph Curry, no longer LeBron James. So the session has been reset, so that's good. So now we have user registration and login working with the proper session flow taking place. So now that we have the data sort of seeded for this project, we can now head over to the home page where all the React code is and get started on the React side of this equation. So The React code is inside the src directory. Specifically, the index.js is where the entry point is. So right here is the React code that's rendering all of this content right here. So what we're going to do is create a new component. Let's call it admin. So this will be like a user admin type of application. So if we head over to the admin component, let's just set up a very, very simple React component. Okay, this is the admin component. Support default. Okay, great. And then don't forget to export it in the index. Now we're not going to use this sample users component, so let's get rid of that and replace it with admin. And then let's import that in the index. So instead of the intro, we want the admin component from the containers. And let's render that. And then let's go back here and open a new tab and run Webpack, because we did change the React code. So naturally we have to run Webpack. And then open the, run the dev server, excuse me. And run localhost, and here we have, this is the admin component. So that's good to go. I'm going to put that in a container as well, just because. Okay. Okay, good. Now keep in mind, this is going to be a Redux application, so let's go ahead and connect this right now and make it a container right away, because we are going to have to no matter what. So yeah, let's set up the state to props down here. Okay. Okay, I am not going to set up a dispatch to props because we're not going to run any actions here. This is going to be a very, very simple Redux style application. Now keep in mind the provider is already provided for you, so we don't have to worry about that. But now this is a connected component with a state to props that doesn't have anything stored inside, but it's ready to go when we need it. Let's go ahead and set it up right now. We do have some reducers right away. We have a user reducer, which initializes the current user as null. This is going to be the key that gets populated on the server side with the logged in user. So on the server side, we're going to populate this guy. Okay, so let's go ahead and connect the user reducer. And I'm getting this from the store. If you look at the store, you'll see that the user reducer is connected under the key called reducer. So that's how I know what key to be using there. So that's where this comes from right here. Okay, good. So everything is set to go. Now, the question then becomes, how do we render the server side? So if we look at the source code, you'll see that we have no server-side rendering going on whatsoever. There's no pre-rendering, which means all this is being rendered client-side, right? And what we want to do is render the HTML server-side. So the first thing you need to understand is that much of the legwork is already done for you inside the scaffold. Now here's what I mean by that. If you look at the gulp file and scroll down to line 58, you'll see an ES6 to ES5 script task that takes your React code and compiles it into ES5 modules in the public directory, specifically the dist. So if you go to the public dist ES5, you'll see our project, our React project, pretty much structured as it is in our regular source. See, actions, components, constants, reducers, with the difference being that these are in ES5, not ES6. So that way, no matter what version of Node you're running on the back end, and that might not even be up to you, to be honest. You might not be running your own servers. It might be, a managed server. Then if you're running ES5, you're good to go no matter what. So that means when we go to our routes in the index route, we can import those ES5 modules here and render everything server side, and then populate the data server side so that by the time it gets to the client, the browser, this HTML over here will be populated. Okay, so in the next video we're going to do exactly that. We're going to grab those modules from the ES5 version over here, render them server side over here, well specifically here, and then populate the data excuse me, which in this case is going to be the logged in user if there is a logged in user. And then we will populate the data and render it server side and then send it down to the client. And then the client will take over from there. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully you got all this working. And stay tuned for the next video where we will basically create the corresponding setup on the server side. So thanks.